Hello, everyone. This is Lee Andrews from Akathame. Thank you so much for joining me today on what I am sure will be an exciting, somewhat provocative conversation about working remotely, the whole remote workforce topic. And I want to introduce Chris to you. Chris is part of Firstbase. He launched this company to address this remote requirement, and we're going to get right into it. And the reason that I say that is because this is going to draw some criticism. This is how I approached Chris to talk on this call based on his LinkedIn post. And Chris writes, companies who adopted technology 20 years ago replaced every company that didn't. Companies who adopt remote working will replace every company who doesn't in 20 years. The reason is incredibly simple: talent and efficiency. But he didn't stop there. He name called. Unless you are Google, Amazon, Facebook, or Microsoft, remote teams will be far more talented than any office-based team you can build. Talent wars will be won by companies that have great remote work capabilities who will wield it to dominate the next decade. So those are some pretty strong words there, Chris.
Yeah, I was probably wrong as well. I said 20 years. I think I wrote that a week before the whole COVID shutdown happened. So yeah, probably say 5 years or 10 years. So in some ways, I was a little bit too conservative.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the universe is forcing our hand, right? You know, big problems offer big opportunities for big change. And so when we are not doing for ourselves what we should be doing, I think the universe has a tendency of saying, it's time that you look at this. So let's talk. Well, I first want you to talk to us about why you started your company, where it is, and what's happening, because you've got a backlog of what, a year of worth of clients?
Yeah, I mean, probably more than that. So yeah, we founded Firstbase in the end of August, early September last year. We're obviously focused on helping companies supply and manage all the physical equipment their remote workers need at home. And yeah, since then, our monthly wait list, or our wait list, sorry, has been growing 62% month over month. Since then, we're sitting at about 1,500 companies today, 5.3 million aggregate employees spread across them, everything from the earliest stage startups on the planet all the way through to 300,000 people organizations. So yeah, we just have a unique insight on the challenges and obstacles that these companies are facing, and really what they're thinking about doing with respect to their transition to remote.
Wow. So what kind of companies are you working with? What size are these companies? Are they small? Are they big? What are they?
Yeah, I mean, we're progressing with all the above. Just now, I think our bias is towards larger non-technical enterprises. So by non-technical, I just mean people who aren't technology companies, banks, credit ratings agencies, accountancy firms, lawyers, management consultants, those types of industries more than anything else. But yeah, we're progressing with companies, as I say, from early stage companies all the way through. We've just got a bias towards those bigger guys.
Wow. So when you say bigger guys, are we talking the high tech industry with thousands of people?
That's where we'll end up going. Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive. Okay. So let's talk about this article that you wrote. Why do you think that, first of all, do you think that it's really an all or nothing kind of thing? Or do you think that there's going to be some kind of a balance? Like, is it going to be based on industry, revenue, what?
Yeah, so my personal feelings have always been that the transition to remote was going to be driven by great people demanding it as a byproduct of employment. So they were going to change companies if their current company didn't let them work remotely. COVID has actually forced the hand of companies to say, actually, we now have experienced remote work. We know remote work works. If we don't go remote, we're going to get replaced by a company that does. And I think that's the ultimate reality we're facing here, where unless you are a monopoly, you cannot afford to go back to the office full time, both for talent reasons and for cost efficiency reasons. And I think right now there are probably a lot of companies who don't have competitors who are office first. If you're an office first company who has no competitors today, you will have a lot of remote first competitors in a very short period of time, and they will be more talented than you are, more diverse than you are, and they'll be far more capital efficient than you are, which will just mean those companies won't be competitive probably within 3 to 5 years.
Wow. So do you have examples of where you are going into companies and they're saying, we get what you're saying, Chris, and this is what we want to do? Do they have statistics to back that up?
Yeah. I mean, there was a recent Gartner report that said 74% of CFOs are going to be more remote after. So their companies are going to be more remote after this. 80% of workers already want to be remote. Those stats are only rising after COVID because people are reluctant to go back to the office. And between that and the conversations we have with leaders in early stage companies, all the way through from tech companies to large enterprises, to commercial real estate brokers, right across the spectrum, the expectation is that commercial real estate is about to get cut. Companies are going to reduce their office footprint. And the reality for most workers is that actually their companies are going to force this on them, where people are going to work from home 2 or 3 days a week, and then they'll come into an office 2 or 3 days a week.
So I always use this example of TSA. In fact, it's one of the things that I responded to in your post is that the TSA, I want to say 5 years ago, was already thinking about this. The architects and the building management said that we really want to cut our carbon footprint by 30%. When we do that, that means that the employees aren't driving as much. We don't need as much real estate. So they're combining a number of different facilities into one building at one location and having this hoteling capability. Yep. Are you seeing hoteling even WeWork was that before it was probably called, hoteling. So are you seeing more of that?
Yeah, I think what we definitely expect is that there's going to be an aggregation of smaller offices into larger, more, I don't know the right word, more experiential based office spaces. So I think in some ways that's what co-working spaces are. That's definitely what offices are becoming more of. And there's just going to be more of a transient spread of people who are going to operate it from home sometimes, and then they're going to spend some time in the office. And I think the propensity initially is going to be for 50% of the time between both. But then the natural reaction from those companies who start to get more comfortable is going to be, okay, we don't need as much office space. And there'll just be a slow drip of office space out of the commercial real estate cup. And then people will be more remote.
So I'm doing this because I'm just thinking of all the opportunities and all the possibilities, and I'm not thinking of any downside to it, right? But there is downside to it. But let's talk about that real estate, and the real estate is going to be a downside to this. So I can think of 1,001 things to do with commercial real estate when businesses pull out. What are you seeing? What are they thinking about? Because that's a big issue, right? What are we going to do with all this real estate?
Yeah, and I think there's probably answers that say they get repurposed as multi-generational family units. I think there's a lot of people are saying similar things are going to happen with malls and supermarkets and all that stuff. I think we're clearly less focused on that, but I think what actually ultimately happens is that company or people or the city starts to unbundle city life. So people are going to live further away from the city. They're going to want to increase their quality of life, lower their cost of living. And the reality is that living in a city just doesn't lead to that anymore. Certain people at certain parts in their life will want to work in cities still, for sure. But for the most part, as you age, as you get older, as your life changes, you're probably going to want to live a little bit further outside the city, which, to your point, what happens to the CRE? TBC, I think.
Okay. All right. I just want to take a second. We do have some comments in the screen. Craig, you are biased. Thank you very much. He's telling me that I'm awesome, but we're kind of related, so that doesn't really count. But thank you, Craig. We've got another comment that's coming in from a completely different screen. And you and I talked about this word before this conversation. You used the term surveillance. That employers who spend an inordinate amount of time surveilling the activities of their staff or their team, and this can happen throughout an organization. This can happen from the C-suite on down. What is going to happen to those people? I mean, think about it. This is a huge emotional and mental shift that they are being pushed toward, and they're going, with a big fight.
Yeah, and I think good in certain respects. I mean, there's a lot of bad middle managers whose only metric for judging performance is how much time you spend sat in your seat all day. And I just question whether that has any relativity to productivity. I think for me as a leader who obviously has a team that works alongside me to try and achieve what we're trying to do, if it takes someone 4 hours to do their daily work and they achieve everything that we want them to do, great. Go and do the things that you want to do in your life and spend more time with your family. I think the challenge is that companies have just become really bad at measuring performance and output. And we've accepted distraction and disruption as an excuse for collaboration. Now, in offices, people will come in, they'll speak for a couple hours, they'll grab a coffee. People are realizing right now, look, I'm working from home. I don't have to I don't have to waste 2 hours a day commuting to a place that I'm going to use equipment designed to be used anywhere in the world, which is so unbelievably irrational, it beggars belief. And then the other part is that they're just super unproductive when they're in that space, because offices have degenerated from being the best place to do deep work to the worst place to do deep work. We've went from the time of having everyone has a private office to get the isolation and focus and space they need to do deep work, to being these open plan distraction factory adult kids clubs where you just can't get any work done. As soon as you get in a flow, someone taps you on the shoulder and says, do you want a coffee? Did you see the game last night? I need help with this thing. So for me, offices just don't achieve what they fundamentally exist to do. Just now, they're just an excuse for people to get together and get out the house, I think.
Yeah, let's try to unpack that one for a minute. So what is really, board, I mean, this has got to be a much bigger discussion at the board level, right?
Yeah.
Of large companies, this has to be so now when we're talking about leadership, you're talking about a whole new way of leading a company strategy, right? And leading that company to success. And then you bring that down to the management level, and that's a whole new skill set. So in your company, because you're providing the technology, right? You're looking at that office space and the requirements and saying, these are the tools that you need to work successfully remotely. Is that right?
At a fundamental level, that's effectively it.
Are you providing counseling to board members and managers and how to work with this? Are you partnering with another firm that says this is where your thinking has to be, or are we all going to have to go to the big 5 consulting firms and say, hold my hand through this? There's got to be a easier, softer, less expensive way.
Yeah, I think to take that step back, we're obviously laser focused on delivering our value proposition, which has a vertical line through organizations. We're going to focus on the foundational tools and equipment people need to be safer, more comfortable, and productive at home than they would be in an office. And really, that's table stakes for doing great work at home. I think a lot of companies have obviously reacted against the catalyst, which has obviously been COVID, and said, look, just operate how you can while we get through this. I don't think that's a long-term strategy. That causes more problems than it solves, to be quite frank. But yeah, I think definitely part of what we do when we talk to companies is try and help them understand the obstacles and challenges that they're going to encounter as they become remote, whether that's the physical setup, the software that they require. I think for right now, there's just a deep desire to replicate the negative aspects of the office remotely because people are familiar with it. Mm-hmm. The instantaneous gratification of availability, people freaking out when Slack goes down yesterday. The reality is if you're going to be remote and you don't take advantage of the benefits of remote, then there's no difference between being remote and being in an office. So yeah, there definitely is that transition that you mentioned from being a synchronous first organization to being an asynchronous first organization. Mm-hmm. And that does definitely have deep rooted, I think, managerial implications for people who have just always operated in that way, and they're used to being able to walk up to people and get the lowdown basically instantly.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the primary implications, if a company does not invest in a more remote capability, even if it's not all, even if it's partial, they're going to lose out on talent. They're going to be spending far more on real estate, because as the demand for real estate decreases, the price per square foot is going to increase. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think I'm clearly not an economist, so I think it's hard for me to make projections on the implications for CRE. But yeah, I think that is the natural assumption as to what occurs. So yeah, I think 100% from a talent perspective, I think certain ages and genders of people love the office. I think it's not great for everyone. I think it's terrible if you want a diverse workforce, which is clearly critical for building great organizations that are capable of solving challenging problems. So I think that's the first part. I think talent is definitely the biggest part to this. And I think the cost efficiency thing is 100% true as well. You look at the cost to provision space and materials for a worker being $22,000 a year. To provide the best possible remote working experience on the planet, it costs $2,000 a year. So
wow.
if you're a 1,000-person organization, you're going to cut $20 million of real estate costs basically overnight.
And then there's I keep going back to this real estate thing, because I think that's going to be the biggest. I think that's going to be huge. You can turn those into condos. Like you said, you can turn them into shopping. You can turn them into all kinds of things, right? It's still viable for something. Somebody's going to need a roof over their heads for some reasons, right?
For sure.
And then the cost actually could go, if they don't know what to do with that real estate, that's the only time that space might go down in price, where they have to be more competitive with it. All right, so let's go and see what we've got. There will have another Chris says there will have to be precautions on hoteling / hot desking because of cross-contamination. So assuming that we don't have what do we call those things? Oh my goodness, I'm losing the word. A preventative shot. What is that? A vaccination. Assuming that we don't have a vaccination for COVID, say in the next year or so, I think Chris makes a valid point. How's that hoteling going to work unless it's spaced out? So good point there, Chris. Chris also says progressive companies fold in smart cleaning solutions to help address whatever that is. Okay. Ellen is also asking for the citation or URL for the report that Chris mentioned that had stats about the future of remote work. So we can get, I think you have that on your LinkedIn page.
Yeah, the 74%, if you just put into Google, 74% CFO Gartner, that'll come up. The $22,000 is on Global Workplace Analytics.
Yeah. How long have you been working in this space, Chris? I mean, you must have known this was coming. So when did you start launching this?
Yeah, I mean, indirectly, we've been a remote team for 2.5, 3 years at this point. We founded a fintech business in March 2018. We decided we were going to be remote from the outset. I never wanted to commute anymore. I wanted to spend more time with my family. My CTO wanted to see his son walk for the first time and laugh for the first time. And we just knew the things that you were talking about, where we'd be more cost efficient, we'd be more talented. And then as you become remote, you discover challenges and obstacles that come with that. And something that was super important to us was the experience and culture for our team members who were working from home. So my background prior to the fintech business was in putting the same physical equipment we're putting in remote workers' homes on oil rigs all around the world. So basically, we just built this product as an internal product in our last business. Realized probably 12 or 18 months later that everyone else had that problem, and pivoted to that full time as the product we were building in August, or late August, early September last year. So only really 7 or 8 months we've been on this full time.
So then walk us through the solution. Let's assume that we have the board's buy-in, that we've got the C-suite buy-in, that all of our senior leadership say, yes, we need to cut our in-house footprint by, let's say, 50%. That only people who have to be in our office are here. And that might be even less than 50%. What is the first thing that we should be thinking about, and how should we be approaching this?
Yeah, so basically what we give companies is a really easy way to develop a great remote work strategy. Our platform lets them supply and manage all the physical equipment their remote workers need at home to do great work. So they come onto our platform, they specify what that catalog looks like, inclusive of all the items that they could possibly need. So the seats and chairs, the hardware, everything else. You name it, we've probably been asked for it from some company. We pre-package that into a single solution. We deploy that for the company, maintain it while it's deployed. If a worker leaves, we collect it. And then we manage the upgrade cycle of that across the life cycle of those goods as well. And then on the worker side of the platform, we basically give everyone control over what their specific package looks like. So rather than your company saying you're getting a garish white desk and chair that looks like it's came directly from our office, you get control over the colors of that, the size of that to suit the space you've got at home, and obviously all your other preferences as well with respect to what your company has let you choose.
Okay, am I missing something, or are you becoming the office supply warehouse for remote personnel?
I think the most interesting, and this is beside their IPO. Yeah, in some ways, it's like we work for remote workers without the real estate.
And so what about the actual technology itself? My laptop, my monitor, all that other stuff. So are you the so now we've got a service out there that organizes all the disbursement of the equipment,
Yeah.
and collects all that if I leave the job, right? So you actually have somebody that comes out and collects it, or do I as
Yeah.
an employee have to package everything up and ship it out?
Both. It depends on the size of the package more than anything else.
Okay. So in terms of technical capabilities, though, what are companies needing to, what about security issues? What about, what if I'm working on classified information? What do you say to your clients then? Can they work remote? Is there a way to get them to work remote?
Yeah, I mean, without speaking out of turn, I think there's a lot of ways to mitigate against that risk, whether it's hardware or software. So hardware, there's means to install routers and such that basically mean that your at-home system can't be hacked. And then there's obviously the more obvious ways with respect to VPNs and security software that can be installed on the machine before it gets sent out to the worker. So I think there's definitely ways to mitigate against that. Should people be working on certain pieces of information, there's always going to be certain things that you need to work on premises from a security standpoint. So that's probably not going to change unless you're working in a locked room and there's other regulations around that. But I think for the most part, I don't know what the figures break down as to the spread between things that are non-safety critical and things that are. There just aren't probably that many safety critical things inside organizations that couldn't be done remotely for the rest of the time.
So you threw out a number before. You said $22,000 a year to bring somebody into a building to work. Is that right?
Yeah, so the average cost per worker full time in the office is $22,000 a year. If you're
That's
in San Francisco, that could be 80 to 100,000. New York's probably 40 to 60,000. So that factors in everything from the rates of the buildings, the rent of the buildings, the equipment, the software. But yeah, $22,000 is the average.
And so you also mentioned that in our culture, we went from these individual offices to fish bowls. And believe me, I lived through them. I absolutely lived through them. And there are instances where being in a fishbowl is actually, I think, helpful to a certain degree. It can be distracting,
Sure.
but it can also be very helpful. So for those organizations who say, I want the benefit of this team collaborating, say for example it's a sales team, it's a high performing sales team, you got to get that buzz and you get that hum in the office going. And this is the argument that I'm sure you face all the time. We want that buzz, we want that hum, we want people feeding off of each other, we want to be able to throw out ideas and get that idea going, and man, this works for me, having all that collaborate. You can hear it right now, right? So how can you replicate that sense of energy that for lack of a better word, that a sales team might have in that open environment? How would you replicate that remotely?
Yeah, I think in a lot of instances, people conflate collaboration with disruption and distraction. They just use the office as an excuse for it. Then you hear the other trope, which is, yeah, what about all the things that we solve around the water cooler? And they use that like it's a positive. I mean, if you're solving problems around the water cooler, your processes are broken. And I just think I don't know. I think companies have realized that working remotely works. I think, yeah, sure, like in person is always probably going to be better than virtually, but how much better? Like, is it 3% better? Is it? I mean, it's not 50% better. It's not 20% better. It's not. I debate whether it's 10% better. It's probably somewhere between 1 and 10% better than like this. So the reality is that that's just been destroyed as a myth by COVID. And then you've just got to consider all the benefits that you get from remote that just fundamentally are impossible to replicate in the office. Not having to commute, being able to organize your life, work around your life, rather than basically organizing your life around your work. There's just so many benefits. Actually having a relationship with your family. Like people say, yeah, what about the people that get their main social contact in the office? Is your boss's hiring policy dictating the people you spend most time with a good thing or a bad thing? Like, I'd argue that is one of the biggest issues socially right now, is that people just have super shallow relationships that lack depth, breadth, or meaning because they're meeting people in an office who they have nothing in common with. So I think my longer term hope actually is that remote work leads to a renaissance of people embracing hobbies, because then they'll actually spend more time with people that they have a deep like with, which is just something that doesn't, like, I'm not saying people don't meet people in the office. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're in a 5,000 person office, you might hit it off with one person, you know?
So this is personal for you, Chris.
I think just if you take it back, why do I have a deep desire for the world to go more remote? I just believe it is a fundamentally better way of living. You can be healthier, you improve your well-being, you get more time with your family, you can travel while you're working. There's just so many issues, I think, with living in big cities right now, where you've got a super high cost of living, you've got a relatively low quality of life, you've got no disposable income, you don't get any time with the people you care about most, you don't get the freedom to do the things that you actually want to spend your life doing. And people have just accepted that as a reality of what it means to be able to have to work to be able to afford to live. And I think actually there's a completely different way to do life, and remote, not just remote work, but remote living for me is what that answer is.
So we've got 2 minutes left, and I want you to stay on the call with me once we disconnect this live portion, because there are things that I want to follow up. Sure. How much of your business right now is coming from various parts of the globe, from the United States, from Europe, from Asia Pacific? Where are you selling?
UK and the US.
UK and the US. Are you getting more buy-in from either side, or is it equal?
I think the culture of the US is to be willing to embrace services more freely. So where there's technology like ours that enable companies to do things more efficiently, I think the American culture of innovation and entrepreneurship is typically biased towards accepting that rather than other places. So I think, yeah, we're certainly speaking to a lot of European companies, but I think most generally it's American companies get it.
And why do you think that is? Do you said that they're early adopters of this technology thing? Do you think that they understand the business implications of not going remote, the financial implications, the ability to not pull in the talent that you need, the inability to flex and scale accordingly? I mean, what do you think is really that item that just pushes them over the edge, that says we got to do this?
Yeah, I think it's in a lot of ways it's the classic innovator's dilemma, where I think that a lot of them see the writing on the wall. I think they've seen the writing on the wall for certain things for a long time. And yeah, it's easy to be reluctant against change when you've never experienced it. It's super difficult to be reluctant against change when you've experienced that it works. And you know, if you don't make that change, someone else is, and they're going to steal your best people. So I think that's really the incentive for companies. And then the cherry on top of the cake there is that we also benefit economically. our workers want this. 80% of people want to work remotely. So it's all those things. I think there's definitely a confluence of circumstance that mean that this is definitely going to rise right now. But I think it will be interesting to see once we do see light at the end of the tunnel, whether people follow through with what they say they're going to do, because I think the proof's always in the pudding when the decision time comes made, what do people actually do?
Yeah. All right. Well, Chris, this was a very quick 30 minutes and a very candid 30 minutes. And I appreciate everybody for showing up. We don't have any other questions because I think you made your point very clear that either we get on the stick or we have to find another stick entirely. So thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who joined us. Everybody have a great day. And tomorrow I'll see you here for Live with Lee at 12 noon. Bye.